Maui is such a lovable Disney character, but have you ever wondered if there is more to his backstory? Let's just say that Maui has more in common with the movie Teeth than I thought, and it scarred me for life. So viewers, beware. Today, we're diving into the ancient culture of Polynesian mythology, shining a spotlight on the demigod Maui from Disney's Moana. If you are familiar with the film, which I think most of us are because we're all Disney fans here,
I don't know what you're talking about.
you know Maui boasts about his extraordinary feats, from lassoing the sun to hoisting the sky. Yet amidst his pride in these monumental accomplishments, the finer details are missing, leaving us craving for his untold stories of his extraordinary feats. I mean, who doesn't want to know how he grew coconuts from planting eels' guts? I know that's the story that I want to know.
This is why you have no friends.
Nearly all of Maui's insane accomplishments find their origin stories in the tapestry of Polynesian lore, where the original myths might actually scare you. When it comes to Maui, Disney actually got a lot of things right, but there were some things that they got wrong. And at first glance, the most notable thing is Maui's appearance. If you've only seen the movie and never heard the real life stories, then you'll probably be surprised to hear that in traditional Polynesian tales, he's more of a Zac Efron-esque heartthrob, complete with a top knot and possibly a six-pack.
Oh yeah, like you have a shot with Zac Efron.
In fact, this version of him is so common that when Maui's character was first revealed for the movie, it was very shocking to the Polynesian community, and some even took offense. Because Polynesians being overweight is commonly a negative stereotype. But I'm here to let you know that this was completely unintentional by the movie makers. Directors and writers John Musker and Ron Clements, who by the way directed some of the best Disney movies out there like The Little Mermaid, Hercules, Princess and the Frog, and Aladdin to name a few, consulted with a thing called the Oceanic Story Trust, which is a cracked team of experts versed in everything Polynesian culture. For many of the 9 evolutions that the movie Moana went through, and yes, I say 9 because it changed 9 different times, Maui was actually going to be bald and even scary looking. But when a group from Tahiti had said that Maui had to have long flowing hair because it was the source of his mana, interesting, Maui of course was redesigned. The same thing basically happened with Maui's size as well. He started off small, but the Oceanic Story Trust insisted that he had to be a larger than life character, much like Superman.
Who's Superman?
What?
And so he continued to grow with size as the story continued to be developed. And then we got the Maui we got. When diving into Maui's personality, however, Disney managed to capture his essence pretty spot on. Maui, the mischievous trickster in the real life tales, much like Loki, had a knack for stirring up trouble, yet oddly enough, his antics often led to unexpectedly positive outcomes for the humans, whether by design or by chance. However, Disney did take some liberties with his backstory, crafting it with a delicate sensibility because of the young audience at mind. In the movie, Maui's origin story starts with his mortal parents throwing him away as a baby, casting him into the ocean, and then him being saved by very nice gods, who bestowed upon him the mantle of a demigod. Gifted with a magical fish hook, Maui's journey mirrors that of myth and legend, drawing inspiration from the rich Maori tradition. In the Polynesian tale, his story starts much the same, yet fate intervened before he could pass away, and the ocean spirit saved him, swathed in seaweed and saved by the animals of the deep. This kind of sounds like Aquaman's story. Maui eventually gets back to solid ground from the ocean and gets nurtured by his divine ancestor, who is actually the personification of the sun. He does find his way back to his mother, and with that finds out that he has 3 brothers and a sister. And with that, adventures ensue all together, painting the canvas of his journeys with excitement and discovery. Yet, let there be no mistake, Maui's status as a demigod did not grant him people worshipping him. As boldly claimed in his iconic You're Welcome song in the Disney version, he dismisses the need for worship, singing,
"There's no need to pray, it's okay, you're welcome."
Rather than the subject of divine worship, Maui was actually earned admiration by his peers and was deemed a hero by mankind. As for his magic fishhook, which he does actually get in Maori tradition, the fishhook is actually made by the jawbone of one of his ancestors, and the god who gifted it was his grandfather. However, it wasn't a gift, but instead he starves poor Gramps to death and then steals the fishhook from him. That Maui, always a trickster up to no good. No, seriously, that's absolutely insane. Killing his grandpa just so he could rob him. I wonder what other kind of trouble Maui got into. Obviously, if you're a Moana fan, one of your favorite scenes from the movie has to be the You're Welcome song, where Maui boasts about all of his greatest deeds he brought to mankind. Not only is it one of the best Disney songs of all time, in my opinion, but also it's almost based entirely off of real-life Polynesian myths. If we go back to the song, some of the accomplishments that he talks about is he pulled the islands up from the ocean, he stole fire from the underworld to keep us warm, he pulled up the sky so that humans could walk around freely, harnessed the breeze so that we could travel on the water, lassoed the sun so that he could lengthen the days, and then of course he buried an eel's guts to give us coconuts.
Oh my gosh, that rhymes.
Quite the resume if you ask me. And as you're about to see, the stories behind each one of these is just as incredible as you think they would be. So the myth of Maui pulling up the islands is a great one to start with. Maui's brothers would always leave him behind on fishing trips. So one day he decided to stow himself away into their canoe and didn't reveal himself until they were far away from the land. His older brothers were obviously annoyed with him and refused to give him bait to fish with them. So what does Maui do? Maui decides to punch himself in the nose and smear his own blood on the fish hook that he has. He then casts it into the ocean using an enchanted spell that he puts on the line, and soon enough he hooks something super big. And Maui tells his brother to leave it be so that he can get the priest to do the proper ritual. Only of course his brothers don't listen, because what do older brothers do? They're not going to listen to the younger one. And they impatiently chop up the fish to be served for themselves. Only something unexpected happens. The chopped up pieces actually turn into islands. Yeah, I told you it's myth, it's lore, but it's kind of interesting. If the brothers had waited, the island would have been a flat surface that was easier to cross. But all of their chopping actually ended up turning into mountains, valleys, and rivers across the island New Zealand. As you might expect, there's a Hawaiian version of this story as well, and it's pretty similar. However, Maui baits the hooks with birds that were sacred to his mother once, and he actually pulls up the islands themselves from the ocean floor, which is what makes more sense and fits the story of Disney more. However, in another story, Maui decides that he wants to know where fire comes from. So one night he goes to a village and puts out every flame that it has in it. He then talks to the village chief in this story, which ends up being his mom, and says that someone should ask the fire goddess for more fire. Well, as it turns out, we find out that Maui is a descendant from the fire goddess and the grandpa he stole the fish hook from. Dang, grandpa was getting it on with a fire goddess? Okay, I see you, Gramps. So of course he decides to volunteer to ask her himself. This can only be good, right? He finds her living in a volcano at the end of the earth, and she decides to give him one of her flaming fingernails, which I think is one of the coolest things ever, to reignite the fires back home. But Maui, being the trickster that he is, decides to extinguish the fingernail. I really don't understand this from him, but this is what legend says. And so the fire god's like, what the heck, man? Please don't do that, and decides to give him another one. But he ends up putting that one out, and the process continues and continues and continues until the goddess was infuriated with Maui. It's probably not a great idea to make the fire god mad at you. And so she tries to burn Maui alive. The only reason he escaped is because he turns into a bird, much like he does in the movie Moana, and prayed to the weather gods to rain on her. Imagine making a god so mad that you pray to another god to kill that god. Like, what? So the fire god gives one last Hail Mary attempt to get Maui and decides to throw fire at Maui when he gets back to his homeland. Wow, this is very reminiscent of Taka from the Moana movie, right? But she misses and the trees around him go up in flames. Freaking Maui, bro. Now he brought fire to his homeland, but in the wrong way. Maui decides to take the old dried out branches from the fire and shows the humans how to rub them together to make their own fire. Crazy how the story went down, but there's also a Hawaiian version of this story. Instead of confronting a goddess, Maui captures and threatens the leader of a fire-making bird tribe. What? I never thought I would say those words.
Oh, now I've heard everything.
And they are the ones that end up telling him about the rubbing together technique, probably to save their own lives from the demigod. Moving on to one of the shorter myths, Maui ends up pulling up the sky. Apparently for a long time, the sky rested on top of trees, which pushed them back into the earth and made it harder for humans to walk around. Probably because there were roots everywhere, I really don't know. In one version of the Hawaiian myth, Maui simply makes a tall pillar for the sky to rest on. And then in another myth, he pushed the sky up with his bare hands, which feels more Disney-esque. What makes that second one really cool though, is that he actually carried the sky on a nearby mountain and then threw it up so hard that it stayed higher. If that's not a character as large as Superman, then I don't know what is. But what about the story with Maui and the wind? Well, basically what happens is that he tries to fly a kite like his tattoo shows Mini Maui doing, but he can't because the winds are so weak. So he decides to approach a priest who is the keeper of the winds and demands that he release them. And so the priest obliges apparently, and then Maui ends up losing his kite because the winds are too strong. But after traveling over 60 miles to go get his kite back, which I think would anger anyone, because that's a long freaking walk. He learns his lesson and then shows the humans how to use the wind to their advantage. Well, they do say you live and you learn. Now, this next myth is not the last one we're going to talk about, but it is one of my favorites. It's the one where Maui, with the help of his brothers, lasso the sun. I'm just going to preface this by saying that Woody has nothing on Maui. So apparently before he lassoed the sun would travel across the sky way too quickly or just at random intervals throughout the day. This made it difficult for Maui's mother to hang and dry laundry. So being a good son that Maui is, the few times that he is, who had totally gotten over the whole being thrown in the ocean thing, yeah, we're just gonna totally forget about that. He gathered his brothers and traveled east to where the sun rested before rising. And then using a net they made out of their sister's hair, creepy, they tied it around the sun, restraining it, and then Maui beat him with his fishhook until he agreed to travel across the sky slower. However, in the Hawaiian version, it's much more simple. They simply convinced the sun to just slow down without having to beat it up or lassoing it.
Sometimes it's best to just keep it simple.
Now for the story we have been waiting for. Maui planting Eel's guts to get coconuts. I love how that is just like such a good line. So this one takes place after most of the other Maui accomplishments. He returns from sailing the ocean and fishing up more islands because, you know, he's got that about him, to discover that humans are making the most out of his good deeds. They're building houses, using fire to cook, the sun was in the sky longer for them to be able to farm and develop routines of their own, and many of them settled down and started families. So of course, feeling a little jealous of the humans, Maui decided that he wanted to settle down too and ended up marrying a woman named Hina. Haina. I'm gonna go with Haina. The two lived by a river that Haina would usually walk to fetch water. But one day she's ended up assaulted by a Tunaroa, which was literally just an eel. The eel would repeatedly sneak up on Haina and push her into the river with his slimy tail. And we're not going to go into the details there because I'm sure there's more to this. This obviously would make Maui super mad. There's also a version where the eel eats Maui's children, so let's just say that Maui really had it out for the eel. Knowing that he would never be able to catch the eel, he ends up setting up a trap for it by either building a bridge across the river to lure the eel to the other side or creating a net to simply catch the eel. Depending on what story is told, if Maui went the bridge route, he would simply chop off the eel's head when the eel tried to cross. But in the other version of the story, he chops the eel up in a bunch of tiny pieces. But both stories end up the same way, with Maui pushing the remains of the eel into the ground from which a coconut tree sprouted, just as he says in the Disney song. I still don't know the whole science behind that, but let's just say maybe it added to the fertility of the ground and a coconut seed was already there. I think that makes the most sense. But we're not done yet. There's one final myth that we need to talk about. And it's one that actually inspired the whole story of Moana. And just a heads up, it gets very weird from this point on. Final warning, because this is going to be absolutely insane. This is your last chance to turn back now, because this could alter the way you see Maui forever. So remember in the movie that Maui does all these insane favors for humanity because he was trying to earn back their love from being abandoned, and this ultimately led to him trying to steal the heart from Te Fiti so that humans could create life and be immortal, but in the end was struck down by her alter ego Taka and then banished to an abandoned island with no way of escaping. So we all know the story of the movie, right? Well, once again, Polynesian lore has its own version of the story, only it's way weirder and darker. So in their version, Maui has accomplished about everything that he ever wanted to do. He had a life for himself and basically set up humanity to have a successful future. But he still had one more trick up his sleeve. Maui wanted to grant immortality to humans, and there was only one way that he believed that he could do this: by violating the goddess of death who received the souls of humans when they died. Yeah, you heard that right. To do this, Maui decided to transform himself into a worm, surprising choice of animal here, and crawled into the goddess's baby canal, her hoo-ha, if you will. Yes, I'm just as scarred as you right now. Maui just transformed himself into a cute little worm man and wormed his way up into her baby maker. Ew. His logic being that if you reverse the birthing process and then crawled out her mouth, immortality would bestow the humans and be unlocked for all of mankind. Only Maui didn't expect one thing. The goddess had super sharp teeth lining the walls of her forbidden passageway, and so Maui didn't make it very far before he was chopped to bits. I've honestly got to give credit to Disney for being able to tell this story in a way that was perfect for young audiences without scarring them for life. Because knowing this information now has truly left a very weird impression on me. One not good, and one that I'll probably remember the rest of my adult life. Sorry to ruin your childhood, but I can't go down on this alone. I need people with me.
I'll just never sleep again.
And there we have it, the most insane truths, legends, and myths around Maui the Demigod. Truly different from Moana's version, but interesting nonetheless. Now that our childlike brains are ruined for the next month or so, check out this video right here, because if you like this one, you'll probably like this one as well. It can't be as crazy as this video. Or is it? Subscribe, and until the next video, bye-bye.